What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Zay. Welcome back to the channel. And today is going to be a little bit of a different video than I typically do. Today we are actually going to be having a discussion about the upcoming ban and restriction list for the Gundam TCG. But before I go ahead with this discussion, if you haven't already, make sure you give a like. Also subscribe to the channel, and also for all those people who have been supporting me through my Wheel of Gundam TCG series, I promise you we're going to be back on that. But a part of the reason why I haven't been making those videos is additionally kind of some of my kind of like frustrations with the game, but I will definitely talk about that kind of like afterwards because it kind of pieces in with the ban list discussion. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so right now we are on EggmanEventsDeckBuilder.com, which shout out Eggman, appreciate you for making this platform. And as you can see, these are all of the cards that a lot of people have been talking about that they either like want, they know, or they feel like should be on the ban/restriction list. And I kind of wanted to talk about each of these cards individually and kind of just say like why this card is valid and maybe not necessarily valid. So let's just go ahead and go with the first one. Yeah, Armor Array. Now, I will say, in my personal opinion, I can see this card being hit in some way, and mainly because, one, it has just the broken ability of when paired, you choose an enemy unit with 5 or less HP, and you get to rest it. And at least to my knowledge, and also shout out to Eggman, because I watched his video when he was kind of discussing this card, but there is only maybe roughly 6 cards in this game, I'll just say 6+ for now, that are like not able or are not essentially in this threshold of hitting like Armor Array. So I believe there's a Hell Scythe that's like 6/6. There's Ultron Gundam that's a 5/6 that this guy can't touch, but everything else outside of that, as long as it's not paired with a pilot, like it's good. Like Armor Row just checks it essentially. So I can definitely see that being a problem, especially, if you have like that 1 or 2 units that you need in order to just like get rid of it, or not get rid of it, but in order to win the game essentially, then, you just pair Armor Array, like those units get murked, and then you're kind of just sitting there like, what do you do? I know, at least in my personal experience, playing with and against this card, this card kind of also leads to what I feel like is one of the bigger problems with the game, and that is just the bailout aspect of this game. There has been numerous times in numerous tournaments where I might have like set myself in a position to kind of like retake the game, like retake the tempo, or I have like a card that I feel like might not necessarily get checked, but then my opponent just slaps Armor under either like, of course, Gundam, or just like any unit, and then just like takes it essentially. I will say I think probably one of the worst moments I've had playing against this card is playing against a green-blue Wing Zero deck, in which I was really close to taking taking the game, and sadly they had the baby Wing Gundam on the field, and then they just paired Armor Array with it, rested my blocker, and then just went in for game afterwards. That was a little tough, but it's a lot of, and I'm not necessarily the only one that has experiences with this card. This card, I know a lot of people at my locals have been saying like a lot of stuff about this card, whether it's like positively or negatively, roughly a lot negatively, but yeah, and I think just like with the aspect of this card being pretty much resting almost like everything in the game, that for me kind of leads to thinking that yeah, this card might get hit. Now I will say in this upcoming GDO4 booster box, I think there's like one or two cards that pairs with Armor Array. So I think unless if there's going to be a new Armor Array that's printed in that set, then like I could definitely see this card getting hit to like one or two or what have you. However, if they don't, then yeah, it might be a little iffy. But I think for me, for my personal opinion, I would like for this card to be hit maybe to like two, and I only feel that way because if you're playing blue, just of like anything, you're mainly thinking of Armor Array. Now, like, sure, with like the O decks or with like Unicorn and stuff of that nature, you are kind of putting like more of those pilots and stuff of that nature in your deck. However, you still are like you're still playing like a 4 of Armor Array and probably 4 of Gundam. So, yeah. So just in my opinion, like I can see like this getting hit to 2, and maybe that'll kind of like help with more of like the creativity and deck building and stuff of that nature. But that's kind of my opinion on that. The next card a lot of people are kind of talking about is Kira Yamamoto. I will say, admittedly, I don't necessarily agree with this being hit on the ban list, but I can definitely see it because it has the ability of, you know, when attacking, choose one of your enemy units and it gets -2 AP during the turn. And sometimes in certain instances where you're playing like a control deck, you could pair this card with one of your early blockers and pretty much like trade with some of like the early units like better than I guess like typical, if that makes sense. But I think the thing about this card is that yes, you can pair it up with, you know, any unit and get that attacking skill, but it's not, at least for me, from my experience, it's not as detrimental as some of the other cards that I'm going to discuss about on this list. But if they do hit this card, I can kind of see it. I probably won't necessarily agree with it. And especially with the starter deck that comes out, or that's coming out at the time of recording tomorrow. Yeah, and with like the new Freedom Gundam and with the Freedom Gundam that also got printed in GDO3, I don't think this card is getting hit. I think just a lot of people are just upset with the effect of this card, which is definitely understandable, but you know, it is what it is. Now, the next card I did want to talk about real quick, also to kind of just pair it with the Armor Array discussion, is Gundam itself. So, Gundam has Repair 2. It also has during your turn, all of your units, all of them, literally all of them have, or get, all of them, literally all of them get +1 AP during the turn. So it pretty much makes all of your smaller guys into slightly bigger guys, or your bigger guys a little bigger, if that makes sense. Also, this, Gundam itself just trades really well with certain bases and stuff of that nature. So I will say the main issue that I think a lot of people are having is because in aggro, there's 1 Year War, Dynamis Rush, and then there's Blurple, which has seen a lot of recent representation in the World Championship. I think like out of like the top 16, there was like 8 that was like Blurple, and the top 4 was Blurple itself. So yeah, so this card pretty much like elevating those GMs or Hizaks or Grace Customs to being able to trade into like the initial bases, as well as just like being able to like potentially just like 2-shot bigger units is kind of crazy. And also when you pair this Gundam with Armor Array, you get to rest certain things, potentially beat into certain things, and then heal afterwards. This card is very hard to deal with sometimes, unless if you like yourself have a Gundam and you just trade with it, or you have to risk using one of your bigger units that maybe you've planned for like later in the turn to like deal with this card. I don't know. Again, I think this is kind of the same thing of I could potentially see this being like a maybe like hit to 2. Maybe I could say like there's an argument that could be made that you probably could hit this card to 1. And like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some other Gundam units out there that might not necessarily be as powerful as Gundam, but are still definitely valid. I mean, there's Gundam NT. There's the other the new upcoming Gundam card that lets you add back armor array to your hand. Yeah, that that card is crazy, by the way. So I can definitely see this card being hit. Now the next card that I personally say I can see this being like number 1 top priority is Corsica base. Now the reason for this is this card. So its effect pretty much is you get to add a shield to your hand. Then if it's your turn, you get to play a Tall Geese token. That's a 4/2 unit. And then if you play Corsica base again and you have a Corsica base in your discard pile, you're able to essentially play like 2 more bodies. There are 1/1s, but depending on like the deck that you play, you know, you have a bunch of like units that you can't necessarily like deal with. Now I know, like there's many ways to get rid of these tokens. You know, we have Kshatriya that can just like ping the Leo tokens or do like a double ping to the Tall Geese. There's close combat. There's what you call it, like Anksha and the baby version of Anksha. I can't remember what it's called. Type it in the comments for me. And then there's also like white option or not options, but commands that can like help get rid of like these bases or these units and stuff like that. So I could definitely I see the I guess the devil's advocate of like we have stuff in the game that can kind of deal with this. However, if your opponent plays this card back to back to back, there's not really a lot of decks that can like unless if you have just the perfect hand, then you can. I mean, sure, you can you can kind of manage it. However, from my experience with Gundam and from what I've talked with multiple different people, this game isn't perfect, and sometimes you have the perfect hand, but for a specific situation and maybe not that. Like for example, I recently played in a new type challenge where I played against Blurple, and my opponent like hard played Corsica base 4 times on me, and I sadly didn't have anything that I could do to like reduce like the amount of bodies that was played, reduce the tokens. None of my blockers was doing the thing, so yeah, sadly I lost that game. And it was kind of like that, and then just also other discussions that I had with people that made me feel like, okay, this base specifically, I can see this being hit. I will say, I think it's fine if it gets hit down to 2. I know, like, respectfully, Bandai sometimes doesn't like hit certain things at 2. I'm hoping that in this card game that they do, but just to get like Corsica base still like in play, as well as you know, because like Corsica base is, I mean, it's cool. Like you get to play like a free body. Like you essentially you draw one. Oh, what's the terminology? Essentially, you +2 or +1 in a way, and then after that you +2. But then, like, I think that should be it. Like, I don't think at 4, this is like healthy. Now, I will say, if a lot more people start playing like white base, that way, like, you can still kind of play like those tokens and stuff of that nature, but it comes with a cost. That I think is like fine. But yeah. Now the next thing that people have been kind of talking about is Baby Wing, and essentially it has Breach 5 and then this unit can attack active units as level 4 or lower as an attack target. I will say personally, I can definitely see like this being annoying. However, I think there's only yes, like there's two ways you can go about this, like getting this guy on the field, which is either like ramping or just like blocker stall. And I think the main issue, I don't think it's this. I mean, this card can be an issue sometimes because, I mean, like if you pair it with Hero Yui, it's essentially a 7/7, and that's pretty much like late game unit stats, essentially. However, like I think the main issue, at least from what I've noticed, is the blocker stall. And let me just go ahead and talk about it. So a lot of people are wanting Gundam Lifrit as well as Rick Diaz. Honestly, like any of the small blockers, they want like either a pair ban or like a limit in some type of way. And it's really, and I will say, I do kind of want this to a degree. However, I think there's like two type of decks that need like a decrease in power, if that makes sense, in order for this to happen. And that would have to be aggro and then like blocker decks, essentially. Just because like the blocker decks check aggro respectfully, and then aggro, like if you're not playing a blocker deck, aggro just like goes. I don't care if you're playing red-blue. I don't care if you're playing blue-white or whatever. When you play against an aggro deck, they do a lot of damage. And you have to like wait to see if their tempo changes in order to like win the game, essentially. There's been a bunch of times, like I mentioned, I've played against like aggro, and they've had like the whole game where they had gas. There's been games where they have like one moment of gas and then like petered out. And sometimes they don't have any gas. And those moments, that kind of feels a little bit like manageable. But if they're just going in, they're just going in. So like I definitely see the hit to Rick Diaz. I think the Corsica base as well as some of the other cards I mentioned might be probably more on the higher end than anything. And then speaking of that, Gundam Barbados Adapt, this is a card that some people have also been talking about getting hit. And I can definitely see why, because Barbados Adapt can potentially ping itself or other units that want to get pinged, like maybe Gundam, because it has repair too, so it can just heal it. And then it deals the damage to like your opponent's units. Or, I mean, if your opponent has like, of course, like an enemy on the field, then you pretty much just ping itself, and then you can ping Gundam Barbados first form, and then swing and get a draw and whatnot. Essentially, this card replaced Anksha in the Blurple deck, and it kind of just like took off from there. Now, I will say I don't know. I think this card is also less. I think if you wanted to hit Blurple in a way, you could hit this card. I think Corsica base would help a lot. And then like if you just really wanted to just like do a big like damage against against the deck, then it'd probably be this card. But again, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it will get hit at all. But like I mentioned, this is what just some people have been kind of mentioning. And then the next card, Wing Zero. A lot of people hate this card just because it kind of like fits into like the bailout aspect of the card game, meaning that like, you know, you can like, and specifically with blue-white, you just block, then you just play this guy, get rid of every level 5 or lower, like deal 3 damage to it, and then after that it has high maneuver, so it's not getting blocked by anything, and it's pretty big. And if I remember correctly, it becomes if you pair it with Hero Yui, it becomes an 8/9, which I would like to say, and I could be wrong, definitely fact check me in the comments, but I like to say that that's like the highest, maybe not necessarily highest attack, but definitely the highest defense in the entirety of the game. So a lot of people are upset about that. It is very hard to kind of like deal with that. I think as like the sets have been progressing, we've been figuring out different ways to deal with decks like this. But I will say also, like in terms of just like I mentioned, just deck representation, there hasn't been a lot of wing zeros that I've noticed from either locals or NTCs or even just the recent like World's Championship. I think there was maybe like one or two in like top 8 or top 16. But people have slowly been kind of like moving away from this deck. I still think the deck is like really good. Like by the way, it's just right now we are in a very heavy like aggro Blurple meta, and a lot of people are trying to figure out how to like decrease Blurple. But I think you could definitely make an argument that if the aggro decks start getting hit more, you're going to see like these kind of like ramp decks slash like end game decks start popping up a little bit more. So yeah. And then Ailstrike, I personally don't see this card being hit, but a lot of people from at least from what I've heard don't like this card because you can pair it with, if you pair any level 4 or higher pilot, you can bounce one of your opponent's like 4 or less HP units back to their hand, which can actually be a unit or it could be a token. And then the buddy is a blocker. And if you pair it with Kira, you can swing and deal like -2 damage, or you can neg 2 damage to the thing that you're attacking, so you take less damage. I don't know, man. Like, hey, roast me in the comments if you want to, but I think this card is really balanced. It has blocker, it has like a little bit of a boost, and then like after that, I mean, after you do like the thing, it's just a blocker that could potentially be a 6/5, or it could potentially be a 5/6 if you pair it with one of my favorite pilots, Soletta Mercury. But still, it's not really like, it doesn't really do too much afterward. It does like some things in the like when you play it, but after that it's just meh. But like I mentioned, if we do kind of move into more of like a mid-range or like blocker type of meta, this card, I can definitely see it being a little bit of a problem, but you know, who knows? Now this card, a lot of people are not, I think a lot of people are wanting more of like a band pair with Mikazuki and like Armoro. But if they did that, essentially they would kill blue-purple. I mean, you could definitely make different like blue-purple type of decks. But if you wanted to play like, you know, the Iron, what is it, the Iron Orphan with like Earth Federation, essentially, if you wanted to play like that type of deck. I mean, or if you just wanted to play like an aggressive like blue-purple deck. You know, these are kind of like the cards that you're going to be searching for. And I could definitely see, I mean, if they do that, I think that will kind of expand, make people kind of think more of like a different way to incorporate like a blue-purple. I noticed some people have been trying to do like a purple, like a Barbados and like a unicorn type of thing. That seems like a really fun idea. I don't know how aggressive that is per se, but I could definitely see like I could see the argument of like a pair ban. However, I don't think that it's going to happen, especially, well, I mean, I guess technically, you know, who knows, because in the second set in the fourth set, there's going to be a lot of like Minerva squad and Zaft. I'm not sure if there's any Takatin or the Alaya Viginana. I hope I said that right. But if there is, then, you know, you can't really necessarily hit that card because of sales and stuff of that nature. But, yeah, that's kind of like my opinion on it. Okay, just real quick, I don't think this card is going to get hit. A lot of people just don't like the aspect of draw two, and a lot of people don't like the bailout that this card kind of like gives in a way. Because like towards like the end of the game, or just like the late game, this card like thrives essentially, especially if you're at like that 7 to like 10 resources. You just pay 3, draw 2 cards, and then oh, whoops, I have a link. There you go. I will say I've won a couple of matches on MSA as well as like in person where I played Show of Resolve, and then I think there was a game where I Show of Resolved, played the Unicorn and Benager, drew a card, drew the destroy mode for Unicorn, and then just had a game there essentially. So yeah, I can definitely see the bailout aspect of that, but however, it's just, I mean, it's still like a high cost. You know, like there's still some times where like you want to play this on level 4, but like you don't have like there's moments where you either have to pick to draw or pick to play like stuff. So like I mentioned, I don't think this card is gonna get hit. I think now low key, I think this card should be hit. And the reason I say that is because of, and I guess this is for me personally, this is just like the bailout aspect, like I kind of mentioned. You know, there's like, I mean, unless if you're playing like this card could be placed in like any blue deck, or sorry, not blue, but any white deck, and still receive like the benefits. And sure, like if you play Striker Pack and then they check in the Striker Pack, you don't get the other token. But it's still that aspect of like, okay, I play like a free blocker essentially. Like it'll be, I don't know. And maybe again, roast me in the comments. Maybe I am coping, but like I could definitely see that Striker Pack getting. I could definitely see Striker Pack getting like hit to a degree. And it just like it really just does so much, and it plays like it essentially you play like another like Lifrit essentially. And I will say I did see the recent reveal of the new 2/4 blocker, and hypothetically there is a world where you play 4 of that new blocker, 4 Lifrit, and then 4 Striker Packs. So like, yeah, and we all know how annoying Lifrit is. Lifrit is good, I will say, but like we know how like annoying that is. And like having 12 of those in a deck, and probably like Rick Diaz. So I can definitely see this card being hit to some degree. And yeah, so at the time of this recording right now, this is just kind of like my like discussion and what have you. Here in a second, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of like react to the new band list, and we'll probably be on like a different page and whatnot. So yeah, I'll see y'all in a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, well, 1, it's a new day, and 2, on the Gundam card game website, there is the banned and restricted card list. Now, I will say, just to keep it a buck, I already know what got hit, and yeah, I mean, I have some opinions on that, but I'm going to share with that here in a little bit. But I just wanted to see if, because typically Bandai, at least from my experience with the Digimon card game, they will hit a card and then they'll like explain why they hit it. So I'm seeing if they did this, but I mean, yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and see what they did. All right. So no additions to the ban list, but there is the restriction of Corsica base to 2. Oh, they do have a description on here. So, originally designed as a base capable of deploying unit tokens as attackers while protecting the player throughout the game, Corsica base exhibits a strong influence on game outcomes that has exceeded our expectation. This card is included in a majority of decks using blue, and these decks have a high win percentage. We are adding it to the list as restricted 2 in order to reduce its use in many faster decks, particularly blue-purple. Oof. And create a more diversity in the meta. We recognize that 3 copies of Corsica base are included in the Wings of Advanced Starter deck, and players will still be able to use this deck in official and sanctioned tournaments so long as no changes are made to its content. Okay, so yeah, Corsica base with the tokens are, I mean, it's hit to 2, and like, okay, there's the casual player in me that's just like, dog, like, you could have done more. You could have hit more cards, bro. But yeah, like the casual player in me is like, bro, you could have hit more cards. Like, dog. I guess like in terms of like the competitive side of me, I mean, like, there really isn't like too many cards to hit. Like, I think a lot of people really wanted like the Gundam and Armoro band. But like, kind of like what I mentioned earlier in the video, there's like the aggro versus like the blockers, and Gundam Armoro is a really good way to just like get rid of blockers and kind of start like beating your opponent down. If they did hit that, then we would probably be in a world where it's just like, I'm either playing like some variation of like blue white, red white, green white, shoot purple white. Like, it's gonna be like very base heavy. But I will say, just in terms of Corsica base, I will say I am glad that they hit it to 2, because personally I felt like that in order to keep the card in the game, you would have to keep it at 2. But yeah, I think Corsica base getting hit to 2 is fine. And there's like different ways you can kind of just like replace the card essentially. And I might low key just like create like okay, I might create like a Blurple list, a 1-year war, and we can do like Dynamis Rush, which are kind of like the 3 like aggro decks right now. So yeah, let me go ahead and just show what you would essentially replace with that per se. All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I mentioned earlier, these are kind of how I would probably build like some of the aggro decks now since Corsica base got hit. And I mean, so essentially this is what's called Dynamis Rush, essentially. And I mean, yeah, you just take out the 2 Corsica bases, you put in like white base. You could also keep the 2/2 and just go 4 of this guy, but like if you really want to keep the token aspect of the deck, then you just like add white base pretty much. Or if you're going with 1-year war, you know, you can still, I mean, you still have all the 1-year war functions and stuff of that nature, but then you just add fall mill. It does essentially the same thing to a degree. Like, you do create a token, however, it's sadly rusted. It is a 3/1, so it can get easily pinged, but if you do still want to play something in regards to like tokens, then like that'll be a good option. And just to go back to the other list before with white base, like, yeah, you have to like pay 2 in order to play like a token, and also, yes, depending on how many dudes you have on board, depends on how like big the token is, but you still can create a token. And especially like in the late game where like usually your hand is like smaller and you don't really want to like play everything in your hand, you can still play white base for a turn, like use the once per turn to play the token, and then play like 1 less guy from your hand instead of playing like 2 guys from your hand and not necessarily having that card advantage. So yeah, and then with the big bad blurple, I mean, I think it's still blurple. You just, like I mentioned, you just add a white base. I mean, you could add some of the purple stuff, but if you still want to keep the element of the deck, then this is essentially what like I would. Let me move this up for you guys a little bit, just because to show resolve. But yeah, this is pretty much what I would like do. Like, Yeah, like, yeah, sure. You know, you can't play potentially like, what is it? One. You can't potentially play like 7 tokens in a game, but I mean, you still have white base to still produce those tokens for you. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts about it. Let me know if you disagree in the comments. I hope you guys have a good one, and I will catch y'all in the next video. Peace.